The story of our identity is organized in narratives and images, sometimes metaphorical. The Greek Olympus was made up of gods with human characteristics. They loved, hated, took revenge, lied, stole, killed, and were jealous. Mythological tales often provide us with a complete picture of the cultural repertoire of a given society at a given time, exploring the boundaries between documented history and mythology has the same charm as ever. The paintings of 2000 years ago shown in this presentation are the evidence of how our ancestors pictured the events. They were found in Pompeii and Herculaneum, but today many of these paintings are found at the MAN, which is the Archaeological Museum of Naples, from which they often travel to be exhibited all over the world. Or they can be seen in situ in the archaeological areas. Collecting these paintings also means restoring organicity to a symbolic and identity narrative, which was alive and lived in the daily life of the inhabitants of the empire. In the following pages, ladies and gentlemen, I will tell you about 18 stories, also of love. Millennia ago, peoples of all civilization told exciting stories, but all built on a seed idea, that is a concept useful for handing down an ethic, an invention, a warning, or simply for educational purpose. Pompeii was an interracial and commercial port city, while Herculaneum was a residential municipality, mostly inhabited by wealthy and culturally known politicians and freed men. Two cities of the Gulf of the Bay of Naples, from where, despite Rome was the capital, the first emperors lived in the Bay of Naples and led the empire during the first 60 years of the first century AD. Just for completeness of information, during this presentation, I will often quote both the Greek and the Latin name of the Olympus deities. The only divinity whose name the Romans did not change is Apollo. The nymphs, divine forces of the seas, rivers, springs, woods, mountains, cities, regions, and states, long-lived or eternal deities. The myth begins by presenting a gorgeous nymph, the Riope, while taking a bath, was seduced in a love water vortex of the river Cephiso. Thus, the wonderful child Narcissus was conceived. Soon after his birth, his mother, the Riope, learned his fate from the fortune teller Tiresias, who predicted, "This child will live until he will not see his own image." Thus, Narcissus grew up under the careful supervision of his mother, and in his adult age he became a great hunter, spending most of his time alone. The hunting places were woods chosen by the Riope, where no streams or pools of water that could reflect his image could be found. Many were the nymphs of the woods who fell in love with Narcissus, and among these one was taken by his beauty. Her name was Echo. But the young Narcissus, full of himself and too busy hunting, paid no attention to others. The nymph Echo was an incredible, loquacious girl. She was often called to entertain the Olympians' deities with engaging stories in their moments of tediousness. Even Zeus, Jupiter, was often asking for Echo so she could entertain his wife, Hera Juno, while he was away to please his love impulses. With the young girls of the earth. Unfortunately, it happened that during one of his gallant escapades, Zeus Jupiter detained too long. And Hera Juno began to get annoyed by the blabber-mouthed Echo. And having understood her dishonesty, she drastically stopped her with a severe punishment. Thus, the powerful Hera issued her terrible sentence. From this moment, Echo will no longer speak as before. She will only be able to repeat the last syllable of the last word heard. What a harsh punishment for Echo, whose suffering increased when she finally managed to meet Narcissus. The frustration to be forced to repeat the last syllable of the word she listened to became so boring that Narcissus left her. Desperate and abandoned, Echo hides herself into the hollow of a steep valley, dissolving herself under a bed of leaves. The gods, pitying her sad fate, turned her into a cliff. And still today, all those who say a few words in a hollow of a cliff will hear Echo responding. The cruel indifference of Narcissus aroused the indignation of Nemesis. Nemesis, the goddess of revenge and punisher of the excess, who descended from Olympus and approaching the young Narcissus, disguised as an expert hunter, she took him to a fantastic hunting land, rich of spring of water. Here, Narcissus saw for the first time his own image, reflected on a mirror water surface. At this point, the goddess Nemesis, taking advantage of his ecstasy, whispered to him in a cold voice, "You are doomed to stare at your own image forever. No woman's heart will ever suffer again for the beauty of your aspect." The myth recounts that Narcissus died drawn in his own image. Here we have Narcissus that holds the hunting spear sitting on a rock next to the water mirror with the goddess Nemesis beside him. As well, in this other painting from the house of Octavio Quartio, his image is reflected and can be seen in the water mirror below. From this myth comes the narcissism, lack of empathy, and self-exaltation, and also the name of a pale yellow flower that sprouts on the edge of a waterways, bending toward the water as if to mirror itself. But also the echo sound on this tale is the romantic answer to this phenomenon. Hero and Leander from the house of Vitti in Pompeii. This tragedy painting tells of an impossible love story between two young folks who resides on the opposite banks of the Hellespont, today the Dardanelli Strait. Leander lived in Abido, on the eastern coast, today Middle East, and Hero in Sesto, on the western shore, today Europe. Leander and Hero, they met at a party organized in honor for the handsome Adonis. It was enough a single glance to be pierced by Cupid's dart. After this event, the point was how to meet each other. Not only they were living on the opposite banks, but Hero was a virgin priestess voted to Aphrodite, Venus' temple. But real love is unstoppable. The young Leander, to secretly join his beloved, he dives every night into the dangerous currents of the Hellespont Strait, swimming to the opposite bank. Hero, from the window of her tower on the beach, holds a lit torch that at the agreed time was like a lighthouse guiding Leander's swim in the dark of the night. But challenging the sea is not always wise. And one night, in a tragic winter storm, misfortune lay in wait. The invincible young lover, disdainful of the danger of the storm, faces the crossing guided by the flame that flashed on the other bank. During the journey, the continuous burst of window blew out the flame, and Hero in vain tried to keep it on, lit it. Leander, bewildered in the dark, fighting to the limit against the waves, he drowned. At dawn, in the stillness of the post-storm, the enchanting Hero was still at the window, looking over the sea. And when her gaze fell on the beach, she saw the lifeless body of Leander stranded. Shocked by the atrocious scene, in pain, she jumps from the height of the tower, crashing down close to Leander's body, thus joining him in an eternal love embrace. In this scene, we see the clothes here of Leander next to his mate, while the young lover is swimming across the strait. Hero from the tower on the opposite bank holds a lamp in her right hand. On the right, we have a map of the narrowest point of the Dardanelles. Abydos is on the Asian side. The city of Hero was Sesto on the European side. This point, it's often mentioned in the classic literature, this part of the Dardanelles Strait. Here, the Persian king Xerxes built a bridge of 674 boats side by side with his army to go across the strait. Near the city of Sesto stood a tower mentioned in the works of the geographer Strabo. And even Pliny the Elder writes that the distance between the two cities is the narrowest point of the strait. He's talking actually about 7 Roman stadiums, which is roughly 1,400 meters. And also Virgil and Ovid are writing of a Hero and Leander in their poems. The composer Franz Liszt, for instance, he wrote the ballad number 2 for piano, inspired by the myth, and Lord Byron was so much taken by the beauty of this love story that to verify its credibility, he swam across the strait himself. Ovid writes that this story took place in ancient Babylon, where a young man called Pyramus and a girl named Thisbe lived in adjacent units separated only by a wall. The two were very much in love, but they couldn't meet each other as their families from different social backgrounds had forbidden it. The two lovers managed to secretly talk to each other through the crack in the partition wall of the units. One day, desperate from these unjust circumstances, they decided to run away and fixed the meeting point in a small clearing next to a spring water source and mulberry bushes. The gorgeous Thisbe gets there first, but once at the site, she sees a lioness with her mouth still bloody from a recent meal. Frightened, she runs away, losing her veil caught in the mulberry bush. The lioness, too, leaving the water source, passing by the mulberry bush, catches the veil left by Thisbe, staining it in blood. Shortly after, Pyramus arrives, and seeing the lioness escaping and the veil which he himself had given to Thisbe, soaked in blood, he immediately thought that Thisbe had been killed by the lioness. Crazed and confused, Pyramus draws his sword and stabs himself. The echo of this uproar brought Thisbe back to the meeting place, finding the heartbreaking scene of Pyramus dying on the ground. Thisbe runs to help. She whispered her name. She says, "I'm Thisbe." And Pyramus, opening his eyes, delighted by the sight of his beloved, tells her with his residual strength what he thought had happened. And Thisbe, in tears, blinded by pain, she takes the sword of Pyramus and stabs herself, joining her beloved forever. The Olympus deity, moved by the lament of Thisbe and Pyramus dying, in their memory, they transformed the fruits of the mulberry tree soaked in the blood of the two lovers into vermilion red. In this painting, we see Pyramus in agony, and next to him, Thisbe piercing her heart. Above, here, her veil bloodied, and the mulberry tree, and in the background, the lioness running away. Same scene on the right, founded in another Pompeian house, showing a great mulberry and a votive white column with a golden lamp. In deepening the history of this myth, made up of social rivalries and tragedies of love, the similarities with famous novels such as Romeo and Juliet and others are evident. Mythology is always a source of inspiration for novelists. Io was the name of one of the most attractive priestesses of Hera, Juno. Zeus Jupiter was so taken by this girl that in order to join her for a long time, he changed the day into night. From this strange event, Hera Juno, the wife, assumed that this cyclical anomaly was operated by her husband and brother. So she began to investigate. But the supreme god, Zeus Jupiter, who was lying in a garden enjoying himself with Io, the girl, thanks to his highly efficient secret services, he was informed of the arrival of his wife. And all of a sudden, he transformed the beautiful Io into a white heifer. The suspicious hero Juno, once in the garden, seeing the cow next to her husband, would not do much. She only asked to keep the splendid heifer, ordering Argus to look after the beast. Argus was the faithful guardian of Hera Juno. Argus had 100 eyes, and while 50 were awake, the other 50 were sleeping, and vice versa. Io had no chance to take back the aspect of a girl, nor to escape. Zeus Jupiter, he felt guilty and commissioned Hermes Mercury to use his hypnotic power to solve the problem. So Argus, by falling into a fully deep sleep, was suppressed. Hera Juno, in learning about Argus's fatal fate, saddened by his death, and to reward his loyalty, drew the eyes of Argus on the peacock feathers, thus immortalizing his memory. Then she continued to torment the heifer Io, sending a cloud of gadflies to torment her. Io, maddened by this awful torture, she began to run from the Caucasian region as far as Egypt. And here, exhausted, she found relief on the bank of the Nile River, where she was welcomed by the divine Isis, who made her return to the original form of a splendid girl. A true thrilled, a smart analogy with the eyes drawn on the peacock feathers, which hidden they reveal themselves so that everyone could feel observed by Hera Juno. A myth that unites the Greek mythology with the Egyptian one, since even Isis hobbled of different symbolism, is often represented with moon-shaped horns. This fresco, found in the Temple of Isis in Pompeii, shows Io sitting on the Nile shoulders, represented by a bearded man and a crocodile. Io returned to the appearance of a girl, only the heifer horns are still evident. The Egyptian deity Isis holds out her hand, as you can see, to welcome Io. She shows a cobra raped on her arm, symbolizing protection from the enemies of Egypt. Next to her, we see Isis' son, here Horus, watching the scene with curiosity. In the background, the priestess are ringing the ceremonial bell Sistra, this one, and a bucket, this one, containing the Nile's sacred water. Here in the center, the eyes of Argus on the peacock feathers. And on the right, a further representation of Io from the house of Meleager. Poseidon sent to Minos, the king of Crete, a wonderful phosphorescent white bull to be sacrificed in his honor. But Minos, he kept the stupendous bull for himself and sacrificed an ordinary one in his place. This disrespectful attitude caused the reaction of Poseidon, who to balance the offense, hit the wife of King Minos with the cars. Thus, Queen Pasiphae, wife of Minos, was possessed by the unnatural desire to mate with the white phosphorescent bull Poseidon Neptune had sent for sacrifice. So Pasiphae consulted the ingenious carpenter Daedalus, who, in order to satisfy an insane desire, built a hollow wooden cow in which she could position herself, and he even covered the artifact, the wooden artifact, with the cowhide and hooves. Really a perfect imitation. From this insane union, after tortuous pregnancy, Pasiphae gave birth to a creature that had the body of a man and the head of a bull, the Minotaur. Minos' reaction, after the first moment of consternation and investigation, gave orders to Daedalus to build a very intricate labyrinth where everyone could be locked in: the Minotaur, Pasiphae, and accomplices. That is Daedalus and his son Icarus. In those times, the Mycenaean power had annexed much of Greece, and the city of Athens, by order of the king Minos, had to provide 14 young creatures every 9 years to be fed to the Minotaur. Theseus, son of the Athenian monarch Aegeus, to stop this brutal tribute, offered himself replacing one of the creatures, and aboard a boat with black sails as a sign of mourning, set sail to Crete. His intent was to reach and eliminate the Minotaur. Once in Crete, Theseus went to the entrance of the labyrinth, where the princess Ariadne, daughter of King Minos, was waiting for him. It was love at first sight, at least for her. Theseus could reach the labyrinth cell where the Minotaur lived by following his bellowing. But then, to return to the exit, he needed a strategy. So Ariadne offered him a deal. She said, "I will give you the solution for the way out if you take me away from Crete and marry me." Theseus reluctantly accepted. So Ariadne offered him the end of a skein of a thread to take with him as she entered the labyrinth, so that once the Minotaur was killed, he could quickly reach the exit by following the thread backwards. In this image, from the house of the Vetti, the painted characters are Daedalus, of dark complexion, presenting the wooden cow to the Queen Pasiphae, sitting on the throne, while the young Icarus, assistant to the father Daedalus, is working on a wooden board. The other image on the right shows the Minotaur lifeless on the ground, and Theseus honored by the saved victims who are kissing his hands and his feet. On the right, the people of Crete, including King Minos and Ariadne. This myth evokes allegories that can be traced back to the search for oneself, the road of despair that leads into the labyrinth up to the ultimate, we can say, the ultimate consequences. Then there are those who come out victorious, like Theseus, and those who fly away first, like the more ingenious and determined Daedalus. The Minotaur means the face to face with the troubles, while Ariadne, on the other hand, to me, it's more an image of protection for men. Women often have more practical solution. The story of the Minotaur and the labyrinth that the archaeology placed in the palace of Cnosso, still visible in Crete, is disrupted by the escape of Daedalus and Icarus, the return trip to Athens of Theseus, and the meeting of Ariadne with Dionysus Bacchus. Let's talk first of Icarus. Soon after that, Daedalus and his son Icarus were locked in the labyrinth with the Minotaur. The ingenious carpenter designed and built wings with a wooden frame and feathers welded with wax. And together with his son Icarus, they managed to fly away. Myth says that they took off at the night from the height of the palace. During the flight, Icarus, despite of the warning of the father Daedalus to fly low in order to cover as much distance as possible before being intercepted by the sun rays, Icarus, inebriated by the flight, flew so high that he caught the first sun rays, so the wax webs melted, and Icarus fell into the sea. Daedalus continued his flight toward the Bay of Naples, landing on the hill of the city of Cuma. Here he designed and built the Temple of Apollo, which can still be visited today. In this painting, we can see the chariot of the sun in the upper left, Icarus out of control, swooping toward the sea. Below, his body lifeless on the shore. In the background, we have the city, one of the Icarian city of the island Icaria, with boats in the Icarian Sea, which still bears his name today. The inhabitants of the island from the shore and from the two boats on the bay are watching the scene astonished with raised arms. It seems that they wanted to catch the fly. On the right, we have another painting. We see Daedalus still in flight, looking at his son, lifeless on the beach. In fact, Icarus' body lies on his destroyed wings. On the left, under a thick oak, a construction tholos, circular, an allegory to Icarus' funeral monument. In this myth, The seed idea is the allegory of the ignored advices that parents give to young children. Do not fly high, says the story. But the impetuous Icarus is the proof that everyone should have their own experiences. Unfortunately, it would have been better for Icarus to pay attention to his father's advices. Theseus, victorious, kept his promise and took Ariadne away with him on the return trip to Athens. But during the voyage, a strong western wind forced them to take refuge on the island of Naxos. Late at night, while Ariadne was sleeping, exhausted from the rough adventure of the sea, Theseus resumes sailing toward Athens, forgetting his promise. It was a lightning fast departure. The hero, as well as being inebriated by the victory over the Minotaur, the myth says that the goddess Athena gave him order to hoist the sail without hesitation. Theseus was a prince and charismatic personality. He was commissioned by Athena to unify Athens in a city-state, the so-called synegismo. Also, to be kept in mind, we have to remember that, and then this in defense actually of Theseus, that for the hero, Ariadne, she represented the hated Crete. In this turmoil of events, Theseus, who foresaw a triumphal arrival in the port of Piraeus, he found his father dead. Haste makes waste, and made Theseus fall into the oblivion. He omitted to change the sails on his boat from black to white. Theseus forgot about his agreement with his father. If he had killed the Minotaur, he would return with white sails. And Father Aegeus would have had the time to organize the triumphal welcome. Sadly, Theseus did not, and Poseidon, to whom Theseus had killed the son, the Minotaur, his favorite bull, took the life of his father Aegeus, who drowned himself in the sea, to which he gave his name. This painting on the left shows Theseus leaving Ariadne sleeping. A sailor helps him to get into the tender above. We have the goddess Athena, who assists the boarding. On the right, however, we see the winged messenger behind Ariadne, indicating the boat of Theseus with full sails flying to Athens. The abandoned girl has now realized that she was left in Naxos, desperate and in tears from the betrayal and lost love, here represented by the winged and weeping Cupid. But fate is always the one who writes our future, as we will learn on the next slide. Ariadne, exhausted by the betrayal of Theseus, abandons herself to a deep sleep. Naxos was one of Dionysus' preferred residences, a divinity always enraptured by the wine nectar that this island generously produces. Dionysus, in his wandering among the vineyards of the island, he finds Ariadne asleep. And what seems to be a fortune of solitude for Ariadne becomes an incredible love encounter. In this painting, we see a true epiphany. Dionysus appears in all his splendor with the crown and vine leaves and vine shoots. Silenus brings him the thyrsus, that is the knotted stick with ivy shoots and leaves. While a satyr is actually here represented with a dark complexion, lifting off Ariadne's dress reveals to Dionysus the naked body of the sleeping princess. She unconsciously shows her nudity. The satyr, too, is pleased by the beauty of the body of Ariadne. In fact, he looks at Dionysus as to have his confirmation. It was love at first sight, confirmed by the figure of the Cupid with the right arm on Dionysus' flank and with the left toward Ariadne's. Yes, Ariadne wakes up from being an abandoned girl, she becomes Dionysus' beloved. Same scene here on the right from another house. The proof that Dionysus really loved Ariadne is that not only they remained together forever, becoming symbol of perfect marriage, but she even had a constellation dedicated, which is the Boreal Crown. The myth continues with the wedding ceremony, and from their union was born Enopius, the wine drinker, Quante, the flowered, and Staphilo, the bunch of grapes. Apollo is identified with the sunlight, while Daphne is identified with the glow of dawn that precedes sunrise. An impossible love. Daphne runs not to be caught by Apollo. And tired of being persecuted, she asks for help to her mother Gaia, the earth. In another version, instead, she invokes her father Peleus, but in both cases, her invocation was. She said, "Change my image, if this is what makes me desirable." Thus, she began her metamorphosis. Daphne was hence transformed under the gaze of the enchanted Apollo into a laurel tree. At this point, the sunlight Apollo, once next to her, he could only pick a branch of laurel leaves to crown his head, remaining with him the memory of his unique and unattainable love. In this painting, we see Apollo, who during Daphne's metamorphosis plunks a laurel branch from the body whose legs are already wrapped in the bark. Daphne will complete her transformation into the puffy cloak, as you can see here, that she holds with her arms like branches. Daphne dawn is the morning light in the eastern sky that precedes Apollo's sun, who, while approaching her, dissolves herself. On the right, this right painting, Apollo is serenading Daphne. The sun god changed tactics. he tried to stop and catch Daphne's attention with the musical harmony of the lyra. Just like any story, there are multiple aspects. The truth depends on the observer's place, time. Oh yes, in all this, there is also the end of Cupid. The myth tells that Cupid, love, had been heavily mocked by Apollo, and in revenge, he threw a gold-tipped dart at Apollo, making him fall madly in love with Daphne. And he had a lead-tipped dart at Daphne, who made her deny his love. So the seed idea are that there is no love possible when unrequited or disharmonious, and that cosmological light laws are really immutable. Here we have another great painting from Pompeii, Leda and Zeus. The mighty Zeus Jupiter was unlimited in his action. He could make himself invisible or take any whatever form he chose to be. The continuous passionate conquest of the father of the gods represented the procreative power, the power of seduction, but also the tension that is created between love challenges and violence. In this myth, Leda is mentioned as the prosperous wife of King Tyndareus of Sparta, and mother of the famous Helen kidnapped by Paris, Leda. The story changed its course as soon as Zeus Jupiter saw Leda. It was an immediate blow of passion, and during a summer night, Zeus decided to act. He came down from the Olympus, and once he reached the sleeping Leda, he turned into a pure white swan. His body was spreading stimulating scent of nectar. Zeus swan then started to caress Leda's naked body with his sinuous long neck. Following these caresses, Leda wakes up, and Zeus, with his persuasive voice, whispered to her, "From our union, you will fertilize an egg from which brotherly love will be born." So Castor and Pollux were conceived, the indivisible twins, champion and demigods. Castor was a horse tamer, and Pollux a boxing champion. This superb painting that we can see here, discovered only a few years ago, shows Leda sitting on the bank of Herculaneum, a bed, and the excited Zeus swan on her lap. While on the right, we have a reluctant Leda who, having discovered the deception, she rejected Zeus. In this myth, the candid and pure aspect of the swan deceives Leda. She remains the victim of uncontrolled desire and deceptive love. The sun god Apollo, guilty of killing the Titans, was condemned by Zeus to duel a servant for a year at the house of a mortal. Apollo chose the house of Admetus, king of Thessaly. Admeto, a hero of mythical action, Admetus welcomed the sun god with kindness, and Apollo, out of gratitude, helped him to marry the princess Alcestis, the gorgeous daughter of King Peleus and Queen Anaxibia. The myth tells us that the married couple, Alcestis and Admetus, spent years of great happiness together, but fate was about to manifest itself inexorably. Admetus became seriously ill, and the time of his end seemed to be fast approaching. Apollo, wanting to help Admetus, convinced the three fates to extend his life. But there was always a condition to observe. Admetus had to find someone willing to die in his place. At this point, Admetus hoped that his elderly father, for paternal love, had sacrificed himself by offering to die in his place. But instead, the old king, Peleus, despite his advanced age, remained increasingly attached to the life. Not only, but he accused Admetus of cowardice. It was at this point that his wife, the princess Alcestis, secretly let herself die in place of Admetus, demonstrating her endless and faithful love. When Admetus learned that his wife had sacrificed herself in his place, he overcome with guilt and despair. This touching story moved the queen of the underworld, Persephone, who tried in vain to intercede with her husband Hades to let Alcestis return to her husband. Only Hercules, with his determination and power, succeeded in this enterprise. Hercules descends into the underworld. He fights against death until she agrees to bring Alcestis back to life. In this scene, on the left, from the house of the tragic poet, we have the reading of the oracle. The oracle of Apollo to Alcestis. The priest, this one, with a bandage on his head, is sitting in a solemn attitude. And Apollo, from the balcony, is attending the reading of his oracle. The god is represented with his aura, a quiver, and a bow, assisted by a priestess. The two elders on the balcony left are Alcestis' parents, King Peleus and his wife. At the center, assisted by a naked handmaid, the veiled bride is Alcestis, this lady here. In an absorbed attitude, she listened to the oracle, learning about the condition to keep her husband alive. On the right, from a wall painting of the Basilica of Herculaneum, which is the city dedicated to Hercules, we have the liberator of Alcestis from the underworld. Admetus still ignores the return of his beloved Alcestis. In this scene, we see Admetus saddened by his tragic fate, being comforted by his friend and family. Here, there is his father, Pherete, and his wife. The scene culminates with the figure of Apollo here above. A gripping tragedy full of human feeling, selfishness, sacrifice, love, cowardice, and divine participation. One of the earliest love story between Ares Mars, god of violent warfare, and Aphrodite, Venus, goddess of aesthetic beauty and physical love, is written in the 8th book of the Odyssey. Venus had many lovers. Beside Mars, we read of Hephaestus, Mercury, Hermes, Poseidon, Dionysus, Bacchus, Adonis, and many others. Stories of deception and adulterers. In the Roman painting of the Imperial Age, the be they fresco, tempera, or encaustic, the male figures are mainly found in dark color. I'm talking about the complexion, while women are represented pale white. The fully painted walls were more attractive, especially when decorated with conversation subject. The few pieces of furniture were designed to be placed in the center of the room. Here, on the left, we see Ares Mars bending over Aphrodite Venus. Mars is caressing the body of a demure Aphrodite, intending to lay her on the triclinium bed. The counting intention is symbolized by the Cupid with the bow and the darts, of course. On the right, we have matrons of the house that are participating in the scenes with an intriguing gaze, while from the balcony, Hermes, Mercury, and his handmaids are observing the mythological encounter with a certain curiosity and appreciation. Here on the right, Ares Mars raised the few veils that are modestly covering the body of Aphrodite Venus. A wall painting of extraordinary beauty. Noteworthy is gold chain that embellishes the neck and the hips of the goddess, while the two cupids play absent-mindedly with the weapon of Ares Mars. Note the detail of the shining light reflected on the shield and on the helmet. A significant allegory of harmony between the two opposites, love and war. In this case, love wins. Love has disarmed Ares Mars. His weapons are harmless toys. From the house of the Dioscuri and the prince, we have the story of Perseus and Andromeda. Andromeda was the daughter of Cepheus and Cassiopeia, who were the rulers of Ethiopia. Her myth began like most of the stories: revenge, rivalry, jealousy. In this case, it was a gossip from the mother of Cassiopeia, who, overcoming to the limits of vanity, offended Poseidon Neptune by claiming that she was much more beautiful than all the sea nymphs. And here is the strategic revenge of the god of the sea. Poseidon Neptune sent a sea monster to raid the coasts of the kingdom of Cepheus, forcing the inhabitants to consult the oracle of Ammon, who predicted the monster will appease his fury only if Andromeda will be sacrificed to him. Thus, the innocent Andromeda was chained along the rocky coast to be immolated to the monster and to purge her mother offense. Andromeda, fate changed when Perseus, returning from the heroic task of having beheaded the Gorgon Medusa, passing along the marine promontory, was kidnapped. The Perseus was kidnapped by her fragile beauty and spasm of anguish. Once again, the invisible power of love put an end to the torments of a splendid girl. In this great parietal picture on the left here, we see the marine horizon here in the background, Perseus the Liberator with his chiaroscuro statuary body and a clock on his shoulder. The hero holds in his left hand the head of the Medusa and the stiletto used for the decapitation. The wings on the ankles were given to him by the nymphs. Perseus helps Andromeda to step down from the rocky wall where she was tied. In fact, the bracelets of the chain is still on the wrist of her raised left arm. Her robe is disordered. She actually, the right breast is uncovered, as you can see, while in the rocky corner there are the remains of the sea monster killed by Perseus. The hero had managed to eliminate the monster by tricking it with shadow games on the mirror of the sea. In this painting, we see a showing off Perseus from the house of the prince, inebriated by the victory, shows in his right arm the head of Medusa that is also reflected in the underneath water surface. While Andromeda, with a more composed attitude, looks at the hero in amazement. The protagonist of this intense expression, ladies and gentlemen, presage that the next step is the marriage. Andromeda marries Perseus, safe and happy after her tragic circumstances. The story of Perseus then continues in many other enterprises, up to the founding of the city of Mycenae, protected by Athena, to whom he gave the head of the Medusa that the goddess placed on her shield. Perseus in mythology is the hero who redeemed and redeems from justice and injustice. Furthermore, during the fight, the sea nymphs took some of the blood that came out of the Medusa's head, which in contact with the seawater gave rise to the corals. Hermione was the daughter of the king Menelaus and Helen of Sparta. And although her grandfather had promised her in marriage to Orestes, she married Neoptolemus, son of the valiant Achilles. Orestes was a prince, son of King Agamemnon and Clytemnestra of Mycenae. The key event of this story consists in the fact that Neoptolemus, after 10 years of war, he returned from Troy, taking with him Andromache, and their son Molossus as a spoils of war. Andromache was the wife of the deceased prince of Troy, Hector. Once back to Mycenae, Neoptolemus, to honor his father's will, he marries Hermione, who during the 10 years of Neoptolemus' absence had fallen in love with her cousin Orestes. Hermione, fearing a royal inheritance, began to conspire against her husband, concubine Andromache. Thanks to the intuition and the help of their grandfather Peleus, Andromache and Molossus, the son, succeeded to run away and hide themselves in another region. At this point, Hermione's last obstacle to eliminate was Neoptolemus, who, unaware of what was happening, he had gone to Delphi to consult the oracle of Apollo. Neoptolemus was in Delphi to find out from Apollo's sanctuary about his heir conception. Meanwhile, Hermione and her lover Orestes had also come to Delphi to complete their conspiracy against Neoptolemus. The two instigate the inhabitants of Delphi that the temple's priestess spreading the slander that the hero was in Delphi to plunder the treasure of the temple and not to consult the oracle. It was a credible slander, since Apollo had been tenacious enemy of Achilles, Neoptolemus' father. On this painting, it's very clear the scene. It's a great report, a great document. Neoptolemus is caught on the square of the temple. Orestes, dressed here on the right, tries to keep him on the altar of the temple. Neoptolemus, here with a fair complexion, tries to break free. On the altar ground, here, there is Hermione, who in the bustle falls with all the votive fittings. On the left, dark complexion, the priest of the temple, named Machirio, who pierces, as you can see, Neoptolemus with his spear. In the background, we have the sanctuary of Apollo with the golden tripod here on the left, in which the Pythia used to pronounce the oracle. A tragedy that has all the ingredients of a thriller: honor, conspiracy, inheritance, betrayals, loyalty, war, passion, and violence. Meleager was a prince. At his birth, fates had predicted that his life would last as long as a piece of wood burning in the fireplace at that moment. It was reduced to ashes. Meleager's mother, learning of the terrible prediction, she took the piece of wood from the fire and she put it into a locked safe. Meleager was the prince of Caledonia kingdom in Anatolia, a forested region. The prince was very much in love with Atalanta, a strong girl, determined, and skilled hunter. In fact, they often hunted together. In those days, there was the custom before going to hunt to offer a small sacrificial animal to Artemis Diana, the goddess of hunt. And one day, Meleager and Atalanta, in their bold youth, forgot to do this ritual. The hunting goddess, enraged by this disrespectful luck, sent the giant wild boar in revenge to ravage the forest of Caledonia. Unable to hunt due to the raids of this ferocious animal, the bravest hunters decided to organize a strategic encirclement to kill this monster. And of course, among the bravest hunters, there were also Meleager and the brave Atalanta. During the hunt, Atalanta was the first to see the boar and slings a spear with a first blow, wounding the animal on the ear. Immediately after, the other hunters also hit the boar with their spears. And finally, Meleager dealt it with the final blow to the heart. The giant animal was then skinned, and his head, as a trophy, was given by Meleager to his beloved Atalanta, since she had been the first to see and hit the boar. Disrespected by this gesture, the hunting companions approached Atalanta and violently stole the trophy, causing the anger of Meleager, who, in a fit of rage to defend Atalanta, attacked and killed some of the hunters, including his maternal uncles. Upon hearing of the incident, Meleager's impulsive mother, to revenge the killing of her brothers, she threw the precious log of wood that kept Meleager alive in the fire, causing his death. In this page, we see Meleager sitting with the two spears in his hand, as well as his beloved Atalanta with the hunting hat leaning against the podium next to Meleager. The girl is shown clothed with spears and quiver on her shoulder. The position of her crossed legs gives her a sense of challenge and awareness. At Meleager's feet, there are hunting dogs, and on the right, the trophy, the boar's head. The two figures with doubtful expressions are thought to be Meleager's maternal uncles. The other wall painting, recently restored, is from the house of Lucius Seius Secundus, showing an interesting herd of wild animals from hunting scenes. Pompeii, anyhow. Meleager saw his day's end, caused by an impulse of love for Atalanta and an impulse of revenge for the brotherly love of his mother. In this myth, the seed message is an invitation to reflect before acting. Sealing was the moon that runs across the sky at the night on her chariot, pulled by silver horses. Her brother, the sun, flies over his golden chariot, pulled by flaming horses to give light by the day. They chase each other, never able to join. The two deities illuminated and observe everything that happens between living beings. One day, actually one night, during her orbit, Selene, the moon, remains infatuated by the beauty of an handsome young man. His name, Endymion. It was love at first sight. Endymion was a shepherd who took shelter during the night in a cave illuminated by the glow of Selene's warm moonlight. Endymion, from his bed made of sheepskin, could steer the splendor of the silver goddess Selene. He, a mortal shepherd, she, an eternal goddess, with the burdensome task of a continuous orbit toward the west. This unstoppable evolution of Selene caused her anguish, as she would love to stay longer with Endymion, but alas, her nature allowed it only few hours during clear nights. Her despair was noticed by the Supreme Father Zeus, who about love affairs was truly an expert, and perhaps also to reconcile himself with his escapades. He issued the following sentence: Endymion will sleep with his eyes open forever, so that he can be entranced, looking at Selene's faces longer. Selene will visit him every night at dusk, but she will only be able to look at him and symbolically kiss him. A platonic love. The myth ends with the memory of Selene, the moon, who at sunset illuminates and embraces her lover Endymion with an enchanted light. In this fantastic painting, we see Selene standing, represented by the aura on the moonlight. She advances looking intensely at the sleeping Endymion. This other painting, instead, we see a fluttering, ethereal Selene floating in the air together with Endymion. Their gaze leaves no doubt about the desire to be together, which the artist tends to represent with hands caressing each other. Today, science talks about lagophthalmia, a disease that makes you sleep with your eyes open. Perhaps our ancestors explained it with an attractive love story. Cupid and Anteros from the House of Love in Pompeii. Cupid is the paddle who unleashes passion, conceived from the union of the two powerful forces, Aphrodite, Venus, goddess of physical beauty, and Ares, Mars, god of violent war. At the birth of Cupid, the wise themes, goddess of natural love and order, prophesied. Cupid will remain a child until he will not have knowledge of a brotherly love. So Aphrodite and Ares conceived another child named Anteros. Cupid oversaw shooting arrows, which were sparks that ignited love passions, while Anteros had the task of protecting love as long as it was mutual. The two affectionate brothers complemented each other, but sometimes when Anteros was away, Cupid, alas, he returned to childhood. This means that love grows and becomes true love only if reciprocated, only if Antares and Cupid are together. In this scene, taken from a painting in the House of Love, we see a crying Cupid Eros, who, hand in hand with Peito, goddess of persuasion, is accompanied by his mother Aphrodite for the due punishment. So here we have Peito, and here we have Cupid Eros. Cupid is frightened because he was aware of his negligence. Eros Cupid had shot by mistake an arrow toward his father Ares Mars, igniting in him the passion of love for another woman. So it goes without saying that the mother Aphrodite Venus was not willing to forgive him. And sitting on a bench, as you can see it over here, she waits to punish him. On the shoulder of Mother Aphrodite, we can also see his little brother, Anteros, who is worried, as if to say, now you will see what happens to you. But then, returning together, Cupid and Anteros, they recreate harmony and true love, the strength that everything can. What we have seen so far are the images of stories and mythological tales, as imagined by the painters of 2000 years ago, just as if they were on a movie set. With this last slide, a graffiti that is still there in the House of the Orchard in Pompeii. We see the flower of life, basic pattern, and an inscription. M. Claudio M.P. Munificent Claudio Marshal Pompeian or Popidius. This is the meaning. So this is the end, ladies and gentlemen. A good life to you all. Thanks for the attention.